I'm here in Vegas playing in the Las Vegas Chess Festival, and I had my Immortal Game. An Immortal Game is a game where you have so many different sacrifices or just amazing play, and let me show you exactly what happened in round one of this tournament. It's the first time I've ever been playing an event like this, and I'm excited to show you because here I was playing with the black pieces, d4, and I played knight f6. And we get into a King's Indian setup, and they play e4. After e4, I have to play d6 because I don't want to allow like e5 kicking the knight away. So d6, I castle, and then I play e5 myself. I don't want to allow e5, so I play e5. And the whole idea is that if you end up taking and taking, sure, we can get this queen trade, but it's really fine. It looks like I'm gambiting a pawn, but I'm not because there's this nice little trick, knight takes e4, so both this knight and this knight are hit at the same time. So for example, if you take and take, then everything is equal and you're totally fine. But my opponent didn't play this. Instead, what they do is that they close the center. And now that we have this closed center, there's a couple different plans. In this case, I've opted for a5 because I want my knight to go to the a6 square and then ultimately land on c5. On c5, it can put pressure on the e4 square and try and knock apart my opponent's center. So that's the goal, but my opponent, recognizing that a5 is to get my knight to the c5 square, they immediately play bishop to e3. And at this moment, I take a little bit of time to think. Keep in mind, this is game 90, so it's a 90-minute game per player plus 30 seconds of increment. I don't know what I expected, but that is such a long time. So time management was a little bit wonky to me. Fortunately, my opponent showed up 15 minutes late, so I had a little bit of an edge here. Okay, I played knight a6 anyway, and they play a3, probably with the idea to play b4 if I do put my knight on c5. But instead of, but first, I took a little bit of an intermediate move here, knight g4 to see where the bishop would go. They moved to bishop g5, and I thought, okay, there are implications of playing f6, right? Like my knight kind of gets stranded, it ultimately ends up on h6, like this bishop just kind of backs up and there's still a pin. So what do I do? I went back to knight f6, and then my opponent went back to bishop e3, and I was like, wait, are we gonna just like repeat moves and create a draw? Like that would be lame, right? For the first round of my tournament. So I said, you know what? Never mind. Let me play bishop to d7 with the plan to play c6. After c6, the whole goal is to get, takes and takes, and now my bishop and my knight are both hitting your e-pawn, and yeah, in general, like I'm just trying to create targets, and that's one way I saw of creating a target. So my opponent didn't take, they didn't oblige. Instead, they played rook b1, probably intending to really push b4. But first, I was like, all right, now I'm ready for the plan. Well, okay, yeah, a little bit of spoiler alert, but I was thinking now I'm ready for the plan that when my opponent plays bishop g5, I was going to play f6 in this case. And after they back up, I was going to try and, play knight h6, and then at some point move my queen and push for f5. And then because f5, if my opponent takes, well, my bishop's going to be on this nice diagonal, coincidentally hitting that rook. So that didn't happen though. Instead, my opponent decided to play b4. And I was looking at this like, this can't be good, but it also might not be bad. It might just be neutral. But either way, I was very comfortable just taking the dark square bishop, right? Now I have the bishop pair, and after the queen takes back, I play f5. And I just leave all the tension. I'm getting worried about c5, but for whatever reason, I thought that I'd be okay, especially if I was able to open up this rook and have a nice line of attack to the king. With the king in the center, it's not developed. Well, for that reason, my opponent just goes ahead and castles, but this is a mistake. It's not like crushing, but practically it gave me a clear plan. Because in the King's Indian defense, a lot of times you have this situation where both sides castle short, and black is shoving all their pawns on the king side to attack white's king, and meanwhile white is shoving all their queenside pawns to crash through on the queen side and then disrupt the attack and, checkmate black. But yeah, in this case, we kind of did it in a weird order where all the pawn pushes happened first and then white finally castled. But I was so happy to see short castles because then I just played f4, which the computer doesn't like, but f4. And like I said, I have a clear plan, and that's all I needed. After queen to c1, I played rook to f7, and this is actually the one moment in the game that I was technically losing. And the reason why I was losing is because the center opens up. Either d takes c6 or c5, especially with c5, I think it's a little bit clearer to me, at least in hindsight. Like c5 just breaks apart my center, and my center is going to be the first one to fall, not white's. So I overlooked this, so did my opponent. So instead we saw the knight start to gallop around. I played bishop f8, reinforcing my center, so even after c5, which I saw as a threat, now after bishop f8, everything's hanging in there a little bit more. After the knight goes around, I was like, wait, I spent a good 10 minutes here thinking, did he just blunder a pawn or is he gambiting a pawn? Because there's a very fine line. This is either a poison pawn or it's a free pawn. and at the end of it, this rook's going to be, I might be 7 pawn, might be a little annoying, but hey, a pawn's a pawn, right? So I ended up just taking. He gave me the pawn, and then he played knight to a1. And I was like, sure, that does discover an attack on the knight, but what if I just play knight a2? I'm hitting your queen, so more than likely you're going to trade off material, and I'm also hitting your bishop. So, if you want the pawn, I'll take your bishop. I'll take that trade any day. But fortunately for my opponent, he chose to block my line of vision to the bishop, and I just played rook to a7. Everything's hanging together. I'm up a pawn, and the attack rages on. After I boot the knight around, and then I play b6 because I wanted to be supported here. I want my rook to be active. My queen is doing just a fine job on d8 because the next plan is to start rolling the pawns down, and that's exactly what I do. Rolling the pawns down, my queen's doing fine here. It's not getting in the game just yet, but after knight to b5, I just play rook b7 and then push g4. So now things are getting dicey. Who is crashing through? Well, if you look at the queen side, it's nice and locked up now. So I'm like, all right, counterplay is at a minimum. We're going forward with my plan. And a lot of times white kind of overreacts to this reaction of the pawns rolling down the board. And that's exactly what happens after f3. After f3, I can now push h5, because if you take this way, I just take back with the h pawn and I'm fine. But now after queen to b2, then g3. And there's this nice idea after h3, because of course you don't want the pawns to be able to hunt the king out into the open and then get a nice check for this queen and everything. So h3 is very, very common, but now I get my rook to this g file because I have plans. And those plans are queen h4 and sacrificing my bishop. So this is the first brilliant move of many. So be prepared, because there's a lot of brilliant moves coming. Bishop sac, you can have my material. Look at my pawns. My pawns are still rolling down the board, okay? And after queen to g2, I saw this and I was like, you know what? I'm backing up because I need room for my pawns to go storming down. One thing that white has to do is create some space for the king, right? Because if the pawns just keep going, it's going to be made in some form or fashion. So rook e1, getting some space, and then the pawn starts rolling. Pawn starts rolling, queen goes to the corner of the board. And here I play rook g6. I thought either I can play rook h7 here and here, or I can play rook g6 and swing my rooks over this way. And so that's exactly how I do it. And then I play h2. I'm like, it's time. h2. King moves, and I play queen to h3 check. When this happened, I thought that the continuation was going to be queen blocks, here check, and just game over basically. But yeah, I nearly fell out of my seat when he blocked with the rook. I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And apparently the best move was not even to give this check, it's to go ahead and just blast through with G2. And I was looking at this much later. At this point, I dismissed it because I was like, oh, it just takes, and check, and I'm just like out of luck here. But apparently there's still a way to crash through. I mean, they try and stop the pawn from promoting, but you give this check. They go here, you give this check, and then when they finally move, the queen is trapped. You're checkmating white's queen. Isn't that just the most crazy thing ever? You're checkmating white's queen, you're going to get a promotion, and then you're going to go and checkmate white's king. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing. But I did not see this plan. Like I said, I did not go G2 immediately. I gave this check, but here we go. This is going to, the rook's in the pins, the king moves out of the way. I play rook to H6 because I have quite an interesting plan. My opponent stops that plan. You'll see what the plan is, but basically the big threat was to take on G2, because here my opponent plays rook to A2. And the tactic here, if you haven't seen it already, relies on there only being one rook on the second rank. So guess what move I played here? I mean, you can have 5 guesses, and I doubt you will find the move. Let me know in the comments below if you do. But the move I played here was not taking the rook. It was king to F7. Can you imagine playing that over the board and just looking at your opponent with a straight face? To be fair, my opponent was an elderly man with a ball cap on, like over his eyes, so he refused to look at me, which honestly I was fine with, but I still looked at him after I made this move, and I was like, yeah, I just did that. Unfortunately, he saw the tactic, but basically you can't take this rook because queen just takes the rook, queen takes, I promote, and yeah, this is completely winning. So for that reason, yeah, by the way, just this moves, and you go and promote as a queen, and you're just crushing. But anyway, that didn't happen. What happened was knight to A7, and I was like, huh. If the knight gets to the C8 square, I guess like things do end up starting to fall apart. So here I hung my rook a second time. So we're at 3 brilliant moves already. 3 brilliant moves here. I hung my rook a second time because I know I needed to get my king over to help protect all these pawns. That's exactly what happened. And after knight to A6, I was like, ooh, I think this man is starting to fall apart, because this knight is just trapped. There's nowhere to go. This rook has to protect it. If you ever try and do anything, like literally like this knight's just gone. So for that reason, rook to B2, and I was like, ooh, what am I supposed to do here? Well, rook to G6. I don't care if you take my rook, because again, I play G2 and I checkmate your queen, and then I go and win the game. So after rook to G6, my opponent plays rook G2, and at this moment I take. Because now like the tactic works again. If you do take my rook, oh, by the way, my opponent resigned in this position, because if you take my rook, then I come crashing through with G2 and checkmate your queen, and then I checkmate your king. So there you have it, 4 brilliant moves for my Immortal game. Hope you enjoyed. Happy learning, everyone.